So it's at this point when I get up to 1,000 grit that the boots come off. It's down to socks only. Very important. I once had a guy say to me, what sort of a boat builder are you if you're going to be wearing work boots on a mould? And I said, well, I'm only using them for the first couple of grits. I don't want to introduce any sort of rocks or anything up in the work side here and then scratch the surface. I've just dually polished. So 1,000 grit, next grit, socks on, up onto the mould, and let's get into it. So fortunately this mould has been stored, although it's been stored in the sun, it hasn't had debris and rocks and dust and things falling on it that's going to create a worse off surface. But this surface is actually pretty good. I mean, I could almost release wax that and possibly turn a product off it, but certainly not to the luster or the quality that I'm after. Now, this is now going to be wet sanded, and I'm going to continue with the one direction with my sanding. That's pretty critical. I've probably already got an up and down light scratch in this surface. I'm then going to do a sideways motion to ensure that I'm actually not increasing the depth or the direction of that particular scratch. Okay, so starting with a clean surface, light spray, a little bit of detergent, working in a small area at a time, and just polishing regularly. Light. Alright, so I've now worked through 1,000 grit on this half of the module. Now I'm out of 800, I'm going to pick up some more tonight. Now I move on to 1,200 grit and I use a small palm sander. I still go wet and dry, even though it's a powered sander, probably not the safest thing, but just with a little bit of spray water and not immersing the thing in water, I'm able to continue to polish with this quite safely without actually getting electrocuted, obviously. But I like to use that little palm mouse sander because it tends to give me a really even finish. I'm able to get into small spots with this one, and then I have a compressor powered to eventually do the entire mould with. But we're sort of moving through it. I've done about half a day on this so far, and I'm already halfway along into the polishing process. And now to the all-important hull weight guessing competition. Now, I didn't really know what I was setting myself up for here. I didn't realise there was going to be a lot of data entry and analysis. The hull suspended here by the crane had a true weight, and I'm going to divulge it a little bit later on with proof from Derek, our crane driver. But what we actually did, we ended up having about 670 entries, which I then manually entered them all into Microsoft Excel, and then had Sam extrapolate some graphs here which we can have a bit of a look at. And if you haven't seen your name here and you'd like to check your weight, I can actually prove that every single person's guess is in here, right down to the last kilogram. Some people got quite clever, had their weights in stone, in pounds, in the weights of how many slabs of beer. There were some very interesting answers that came through to me, but I was able to convert them all and right down to kilos, which is really the only measurement, isn't it? So what I've done here is I've got the list here, and then young Sam, my son, I came up to visit him and gave him a bit of a job, and we came up with these tables here. So our first chart here shows that 253 of you are actually below the actual weight, and 381 of you were actually above the weight. There was a quite a fine margin as to how many people actually were right within 100 kilos, and then this next chart that I'm going to show you here actually shows you the spikes in 100 kilo increments. So we've basically got within 0 to 100 from the actual weight was quite an interesting development. So a lot of you guessed very high, a lot of you were very, very low, but the reality was that 50% of you were within 1,000 kilos on each side of the actual weight. And then looking at the cumulative guesses here, as I scroll down onto the last chart that we have here, you can see that it was an interesting variation in choices. Now, I would put a lot of that down to the fact that a lot of you aren't used to working in kilos, and I admire the ones that actually got within 1,000 kilos, because that shows a lot of faith in me to build a reasonably lightweight boat. I would have to say that I think I am on a reasonable target to attain the goal weight that I'm actually seeking, which I'll divulge in a later episode. But it was a very, very interesting process to go through to see what everybody had thought, and the distribution of the actual guesses here shows that there's quite a wide range of thought process going into this, and it actually shows that you're all very vested in the end result. And this final distribution of the guesses actually shows that 50% of you were within 1,000 kilos of the actual desired weight. Now I'm going to actually let you know who is the winners at the end of this video. You'll have to hold on for a little bit more polishing. I have now finished the wet and sanding of this module. It was a bugger. It's taken me 3 days, pretty much 3 full 8-hour days to polish this guy up, and I just did a little bit of test polish. Now this will attest to the beauty of gel coat. This is a tooling gel coat. If this was a standard gel coat like you'd use on the edge of a boat, probably wouldn't have come up as well as this. But because of the quality of the gel coat that's used in the tooling process, or the actual fabrication of these molds, I'm able to bring this back to a luster that's just ridiculous. That there is wet sanded. This here has been polished, and that is as good as you'll ever need to derive a good product out of. And this has been my mantra the whole way along, is to get these molds back to a surface preparation level that I can pull a good product off. And that's why when you see my hull demolded in the hull demolding video, that it actually has such a good luster on it. All the fairing and all the paint work that people do on their foam modules, I mean, I could have spent 2 or 3 months building this particular module out of foam, glassing it, fairing it, sanding it, fairing it, painting it, sanding it, fairing it, painting it. But because I've got the molds, I can actually produce it relatively quickly. Now in 2 weeks I can knock out this module. So that is a very good testimony, with around about probably less than $500 worth of materials in it. That is where we win in this situation. Admittedly, I had to buy the molds, but because I've got the molds, I'm able to reproduce it. So it is a huge cost saving. Labor time to polish, well, it's my time and it's my project, so it really doesn't matter. But to get that, and I'm about to buff this entire thing out 4 times. We're going to do it with 1 layer of like a fine, like a medium cut, then a fine cut, then a super fine cut, and then I'll move on to sealer glaze, and then 4 or 5 hand waxes of release wax before I'll even contemplate gel coating this. So look at that, beautiful, pretty happy with that. Okay, we've just finished 2 solid buffs with a medium cut and then a fine cut, and I've chosen not to go with the third one, the super fine, because to be honest, what I've got here is just almost as good as new. The finish is incredible. How I'm going to improve on that though, because it's sat for 13.5 years, I think it was close to 14 years in the sun, and in the Queensland sun for 10 of that, and the last 3 sitting here. Gel coat typically is porous. Now because it's a tooling gel, it can be restored quite readily, obviously, as I've shown you here, but the best thing you can do is wax some of this on it. TR sealer glaze, this stuff's incredible. It actually fills the pores and stops the porosity in the mold, and then what it does is it seals the gel coat to stop any chance of that gel coat, you know, working its way into any little pores or anything that you might find in the actual mold itself. Also great if you're vacuuming as well, because it actually improves that seal on the vacuum. Now I can't vacuum infuse these molds. They're not made with a proper type of resin that can aid in vacuum infusion. If I wanted to add a larger flange, there'd be a lot of work to do this. If I did another boat, that's exactly how I'd do it. I'd be adding flanges and I'd be sealing them, and then I'd be bagging the whole thing, pull it all in one shot, can't do that with this one. Haven't got the time, haven't got the risk of it failing on me. And to get all these flanges on here is a good another week's work, and then I've got to seal it. It's just not worth it. So I'm going to basically give this now a complete buff with sealer glaze, and that's going to then lift it to the level where all it needs then is the release waxes, and I'm not even going to PVA this one. I'm not going to put that polyvinyl alcohol on it. That can create its own problems. I like it for release, but everything else is released effectively. I'm going to basically do the same thing with this one. Alright, so moving on to sealer glaze, very important you change your buffer. I've actually got one that I keep just for sealer glaze. You don't want to go mixing that up with your heavy cut or your medium cut buffer, because this is already laden with polish. Don't want to do that. I'll do one layer with this, and then the second one I'll do with the foam, just to get that really beautiful luster. So a bit of work to do, going to get into it now. And wear a mask while you're polishing. You don't want the fumes of this stuff. You don't want to be breathing this. Probably got some sort of a carnauba oil or something in it, or carnauba wax. You don't want that coating the inside of your lungs. I always wear a mask when I polish. Very, very important. So I'm up at Sam's place today in Sydney. Janet's been called back into work in North Sydney, so they're trying to fill the offices in our city space, and Sam's just got a beautiful little golden retriever puppy. He and Veronica have just picked her up last week, and this is Mila, everyone. She's gorgeous, this dog. Okay, let's get on to the winners of the guessing competition. Jesus, I don't know who's got a hard job here, mate.
I don't know if it's a hard job, but
Did you have a perfect weight after all that?
You'd have to say it'd be 3,550, I'd say.
Okay, perfect. 550 more than I thought. And 100 of it's that bulkhead I didn't take out. And I have to announce that in first place we have Dan Muir. Now, I'm not sure where you live. I actually went to school with a guy called Danny Muir, so you possibly could be him, and no correspondence will be entered into in this. This has all been fairly done. So Dan Muir at 3,550 kilos. And second place we've got Raymond Ham. And Raymond, I'm not exactly sure where you're from either. What I should have done was ask for your locations, and I could have announced where you're from. And you guessed at 35.45. I thought that was a pretty good effort. And then Rob F. Net. I'm not really sure what that means, but I'm imagining it's your handle. So Rob, this dog's just biting my finger. She's got razor sharp teeth. Rob F. Net, 35.57. So all within 7 kilos. I think those three, you guys are going to get a shirt, one of these guys, without the YouTube logo on it, because I'm not allowed to sell that, and a mug. So you're going to have pour some scotch or pour some whiskey into that, and have one for me, and enjoy it when you receive them, guys. Now, what I'd like you to do is, if you can contact me through either Facebook or even message me through the next video or something to that effect, and I'll get these out to you. I'm not sure how long they'll take. I'm going to order them from Teespring Direct, and they'll just go straight to you. Now, if you haven't got a shirt, get yourself one. Why would you go and buy a big company bloody logo shirt when you can have one of these? I mean, who doesn't want to look as good as this, particularly with a little dog like this? Look, she's beautiful, and this dog's 8 weeks old, I think. That's it. I've come good, and I need you to now keep watching the videos. Plenty to come, guys. I've got a lot more to come. Yesterday I flipped the deck mould over. Now that was pretty spectacular. If you think that the demoulding of the video was a heart stopper, wait for this one. I had major stress with this thing. It was like the biggest kite you've ever seen, this monster mould up in the air, and yeah, there was a bit of wind. So that video will be coming up as we progress further forward. So stay tuned, and thanks for joining me, and congratulations guys, 3 winners, and tell you what, pretty close and on the mark, wrapped. All right, all week I've been restoring that mould there. All I need to do now is give it 2 or 3 coats of release wax. Now I use a high temperature release wax, and that is that TR product. So good, goes on pretty smoothly, comes off really easily. I've used a number of different release waxes that have been absolute stinkers to get off. So if you're using release waxes and PVAs, make sure you find stuff that's easy to apply. I'm not going to PVA that. I'm pretty confident I'm going to get that off, because I'm going to put some air holes in it for high pressure air release. And you know, the PVA is the answer if you're not confident with your moulding. It gives you that plastic sort of barrier in between the mould surface and the product itself. Next job, got to get this going. It hasn't been used for probably about 6 months. So the key is to get this thing running, make sure that everything, all the systems in place, and I'll run acetone through it first to make sure that all the lines are clean and to make sure that the pump's actually pumping correctly. Now I left that bucket there full with some acetone in it. I thought I'll reuse that as the first clean before I go through the next process. Now, because I'm going from resin, the last thing that was sprayed through that machine was vinyl ester when I made some panels for Ron's hard top. I'll just show you the photo of the hard tops that I made around about 12 months ago, and you know, all that's still coming up on the composite shop when we get around to doing it. But essentially, that acetone there was tainted with resin, vinyl ester resin. The next thing I'm going to spray through this machine is white gel coat that's going to be on that mould in a couple of days' time. So I need to make sure this is as clean as it was the day it came out of the factory. And the only way to do that is to flush it with acetone. So I'm going to fill that with probably about 4 or 5 litres of acetone, give it a really good flush through the gun system and everything to make sure that everything is clean and ready to go again. So this was half a bucket of acetone 6 months ago. Look at that. That is residue. That isn't... and that's actually what was cleaned out of the machine. So that's what's regurgitated or reflux through that machine. And it's an interesting texture, this stuff. Probably shouldn't be handling it, but it's yuck. It's hideous stuff. Still very tacky. And essentially that's the remnant of the resin that went through the machine. There's still a little bit of liquid there, but not much. And you know, evaporation is such that you're just going to lose all your product. There's no point in trying to store acetone in a non-sealed container. I'm going to go out and tip that in the bin. There's only one place for that. Look at that, still a bit tacky, but certainly very, very worthwhile cleaning out a machine. A machine like that yielded that much residue resin when I cleaned it last. So there's a good chance there's probably still a bit in there. So I'm going to give that a really good flush out. You'll notice another thing, that I've got the entire region tarped. There's a bloody good reason for that. This is one of the messiest processes you can go through. The entire floor in here, with the exception of that center area there, is tarped. This is my wet area. It's an area that I can just throw the tarps away when I'm done and restore my factory back to how it was. Under here is a perfectly beautiful grey surface. So I've been waiting for 3 days for the gel coat for this. I've got some gel coat, but it's about 6 to 8 months old. I'm not prepared to use it, and I've been waiting for 3 days. Normally we get an overnight delivery here from Sydney with with our gel coats and our materials. But yeah, this, I don't know what's going on. It's a pretty busy time, summertime down here, but not good enough, so not happy. So I'm working on a couple of other jobs. I'm sort of going back and forth doing a lot of little things that I'm thinking, need to get that done, need to get that done. In 6 months, I'm doing them now to try to get them out of the way. But yeah, I just want to get onto this. I want to get a layer on this. Now, we're supposed to hit into the mid-40s on Monday and Tuesday, and it's now Thursday. So I'm really starting to struggle to get the schedule right for this. Might be some 3 a.m. starts or something to get some laminates into this guy to get it up to the point where I'm putting foam on it. So not happy. So right now I'm working down on the deck mould, trying to get it. It's getting flipped on Friday week or tomorrow week. So trying to level it up, get it all sort of squared. I've got a couple of little minor adjustments to make before I flip it over, and then I can get on with that. But yeah, for now I'm waiting on a gel coat. Not happy at all.